That works. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the 9 a.m. slot. There are a lot of good talks this morning, so I'm very excited that you decided to show up here. I'm going to be talking to you about how to speak your user's language. You've built a site, you've built an application, and now you want to take it abroad. You want to reach different regions, different countries, people who speak different languages or different cultures. And there are a few things that are easy to look out for. Your site needs to be in multiple languages. You might need to support different time zones. But there are also a lot of things that people tend to forget about. So we're going to be covering those, and I've collected a lot of examples to highlight to you how these can be an issue and how to resolve them in most of the cases. Sometimes I don't have an easy solution for you, sadly. I can only tell you that you have a problem, and then it's up to you. The talk started as a quick lightning talk in Antwerp, a 5-minute talk where I gave a few examples of things that I normally see developers and designers forget. And after that talk, people came up to me and they told me, hey, your example gave me a reminder of another example that I encountered. And I kept collecting these examples, and the result is this talk, how to speak your user's language. So from a 5-minute talk, hopefully we can fill the next 60 minutes, we'll see. This will work eventually. There we are. This is me. I'm Robin Martijn. It's spelled as Robin, the red breast, the bird. This is my dog. This is Pooh. He has legs. He doesn't use them, so I carry him around to the office. This is my fiancée. It's the human-shaped creature. This is what I do. If I've got time left, I travel, or at least I travel as much as I can. And this is where I live. This is in the Netherlands. This is Rotterdam. This is where I was born, where I was raised, and where I still work. So this is my daily view. And this is where I work. I work in Rotterdam at a digital agency, and we build sites and applications for companies that are scaling currently. So the issues that you'll be seeing, the problems that we're encountering, are problems that I see throughout my daily work. Before we start off, there are a few definitions that I need to tell you. I won't be using these definitions later in the slides, but I think they're important to know to be able to talk about going global and reaching different cultures and languages. There are two of them. Firstly, there is internationalization, and internationalization is the process. There we go. It's the process of designing a software application so that it can be adapted to various languages and regions without engineering changes. So the engineering changes themselves are the internationalization process. After you've gone through the internationalization process, you can start the localization process. And the localization process is the process of adapting the internationalized software you just built for a specific region or language by translating text and adding local specific components. Those are the two things you need to know. So this would be a text in American English. This would be the localized version for this talk. That's the process of localizing. I now do see that sometimes I've got gray text, and that wasn't visible on my monitor, so it could be that there are some gray text left in some slides. Just ignore them. Yeah, two definitions you need to know. We won't be using them anymore in this slides, but I find it important to make you aware that these are two different processes. In this talk, we'll be covering both of these processes. We'll be talking a bit about the issues you can have when internationalizing software, and we're going to be talking about the issues you can encounter when localizing software. So there are 9 things I want to cover. Most of them you might be already aware of. So we're going to see where the line is between what you already realize and what you don't realize yet. First one is an easy one that people normally realize. Date formats. Date formats are different per region. So which date is this? This can be the 6th of November. It can be the 11th of June. It could be both. There's no way to know, since there are 3 different formats that are used internationally. Those are these 3 formats. There's day, month, year, month, day, year, and year, month, day. Is there a standard? I mean, these three are all used, but is there a standard? Anyone?
Yeah, the one on the bottom, the OSA standard.
Yes. The bottom one is an official standard. We just have a standard for this. So, and the easy thing is, you can't mess up the bottom one, because there is no way someone could be confused on this one. So yes, there is a standard. We all agreed on this in 1988, and we decided to use this. So if you're using an airplane, I can guarantee you that the systems behind that will be using this format. So this is our standard. Easy enough, just use this. Well, before we dive into that, let's look at how this is used in technology. So let's look at the email I got from NDC London when I booked my ticket. This uses the standard. This is great. This is year, month, day, and then the time notation as defined in the standard. Great. Let's look at the website. It's up here. This doesn't use standard. Why is this? Anyone got a guess? Because we've been doing things on the internet before 1988 as well. So defining a standard in 1988 was a bit late. This is the RFC standard that was defined in 1982. So too late. So the internet doesn't even use the standards they come up with to solve this issue, nor do humans. So this is the standard you would use to make sure that everyone understands which date you're talking about. But then, these are all correct as well. Because even if you agree on the order of the date, month, and year, you can still have a different definition on how they are supposed to be shown. So we have the slashes, we have the dashes, we have the dots, we have the spaces. Sometimes they're even joined together. Those are all valid, because these are all different versions in different regions. And yes, it would be easy if the whole world would just use one standard. Of course that would be easy. But if that were the case, then we would all speak English as well. That would make sense, that would be easier. But there are good reasons not to do that. Who of you were at the keynote yesterday? Yeah, most of you. There was a talk there, there was a keynote, of Scott Hanselman, who told about his son, who asked him why the Finnish people didn't just accept that they lost to English and switch over, because this is Finnish. This is a text about copper pens, I guess. That's what ChatGPT tells me it is. I've got no clue. This doesn't make any sense internationally. There's no reason for the Finnish people internationally to use Finnish, since English is way more common spread. But there are still very good reasons to keep the traditions that you've always had, such as with languages. So just trying to make everyone use the same standard is not a realistic thing. If you were doing that, you should also do that for things like languages. So these are all valid. How do you handle this as a developer? How do you take care of this? Well, most languages and most frameworks just have built-in functions for that. So I like working in PHP. And they have a date formatter for this. And I can tell the date formatter the format I want to use for the date and the time. I tell it in which region I am, which language, and I get the correct way of showing my date and time. And notice how you immediately see the wrong one in there as well. The only one that uses a different format, that's being taken care of here. There are easy ways to do that. There's not a good reason to mess this up when you're developing. That's one. The second one is currency usage. So currency usage can be a very tricky one. So let's look at a few examples. This is how currency usage is being done a lot of the times. You have a sign and a number. Easy peasy. So we're in London now. We use pounds. Sure enough, we have a pound sign, and we add the number behind that. Easy enough, right? and we can use a different sign for different valutas, different currencies. So the US dollar has a dollar sign. This works. Replace the string literal with a currency sign and we're there. But what's this? What's the difference here? Yeah?
It's the same symbol for different combinations.
Correct. The exact same symbol, but it means a different currency. This is Canadian dollars. So if you're going to work globally, you need to make very clear in which currency you're working. And that sign is not going to cut it. That's not enough. I'm on the squeaky part of the stage. That's not going to cut it. So you need to be very clear. And one way to do that is to use the actual sign as it's intended to, because these signs are the official signs. That's one way. There are other ways as well. You can also in a web shop make clear with text that you're in Australian dollars or Canadian dollars. You can do that, that's fine. But be aware that the dollar sign doesn't mean anything. And this is not a theoretical example. This is an article from The Guardian in December 2023. And note how it still isn't clear how much they were fined. It's Australian dollars, of course. This is an Australian court. But this was the issue, and well, The Guardian didn't really care. Yeah, so be clear, this actually has consequences if you mess this up. Okay, so we're replacing the currency sign with a dynamic value that we are very clear about. We communicate that towards our end users. There we go, we have euros, with euros, with euros, we have euros, we have euros. Because these are all valid as well. Same issues with the date formats. Even if you agree on the sign, there's still a whole lot of different ways to display your value. What's the difference between these? These are different regions. So these are all euros, but it displayed in different regions. And once again, most languages, most frameworks will help you with this if you take the time to actually dive into it. So PHP again, it's just a good language, has a number formatter which can format currencies for you. Just tell it that you're working in euros, tell it in which region we are, and it will fix this. It will display this for you. There's no reason to mess this up. This is built in most languages. Great. Those are the things that people realize. Now we're going to dive into things that people normally are not aware even exists. So who of you speak multiple languages? 1, 2. The rest of you is British? Or American? Yeah. Okay. That's okay. We're going to be diving into grammatical numbers. And if you speak multiple languages, there's a good chance that you already know what this is, even if you're not aware of this. So we're going to start with a quick crash course, and I'm going to need your input here. What's this? Just tell me. What are you seeing? An apple. One apple. Thank you. So what's this? Thank you. 2 apples. What's this? 3 apples. Yeah, I'm not tricking you. This is easy. 1 apple, 2 apples, 3 apples. What's the pattern here? We have a number, and then we have an apple, and if it's plural, we have multiple apples. Mind you, in English, 0 is also plural, so it's 0 apples, only the singular form is different. So we have a singular form, and we have a plural form. Easy enough. This is what we do when we're programming. This is what you see in a lot of examples. If you're diving into a new framework, this is how they're going to show you how this works. Hey, you can have a ternary operator. It's either singular or plural. Easy enough. But this doesn't cut it. This works in English, sure. If you're only focused on English, this works. But this is how you do singular and plural in Arabic. There's a different form for the numbers 3 to 10 than for 20 to 90, although there is an exception for 11 to 12. And then sometimes the nouns switch gender, whatever that may mean. So just giving a translator the option to translate singular and plural form It's not going to work in Arabic. You're simply getting wrong translations. You can't do that. And that's not the only language that has it. There are multiple ways of handling grammatical numbers. The easiest one is singular versus plural. This is the one that we know from English. But even English has a second form. There are also nouns that follow a different pattern. They follow singulative versus collective. Now, does anyone want to guess what that means? You use this. Yes, exactly. Cattle is a collective form, yes. So the plural form has a singulative form. Yeah? So even for some words, there's not a one and multiple situation. It doesn't really work like that. Then there's also dual form, which doesn't really exist in English anymore, although it used to, and there are still remainders of that. So both, either, neither, nor. Those are words that remained after dual was no longer used. So the dual form is something that English used to have, and there are a lot of languages that still have it. So that would mean that you need a different form for one, for two, and for plural. You can also have that with trial. There's a special form for three. And you can have that for quadral and quintal as well. And no, I'm not going to name a whole list of 7 and 8. No, but quadral and quintal is a special one because there's not a real consensus whether this is actually used in natural languages. So trial, we know, is used in countries around New Zealand, for example, these small island states. We know that trial is used in some of the indigenous languages there. But quintal and quadral are ones that we aren't really sure about. However, they are used in sign language, which doesn't matter for your website, but I still want to tell you. So in sign language, there are different forms for quintal and quadral. And it took research to find that out, weirdly enough. I mean, these people use it, but no one knew until they researched that. Then there's a paucal form. Anyone want to take a guess what that is? This is a very common one, actually. It doesn't exist in English, but it exists in Arabic, for example. It means a few. So in Arabic, numbers from 3 to 11 are considered a few and get a special form. So they are an exception. And then there are a few, well, obscure ones, I think I may call them. So I think I wrote it down. Yeah, a sign language again, but still. In Ugandan sign language, there is a special form for 6. So 6 people has a separate word. I don't really know why, and nor do they, but it exists. So be aware that if you're offering a translator to translate text, you can't simply give them a singular and a plural form. So a framework like Laravel has options to simply return the number and the string literal, and then the translator can determine all of the groups of words. So frameworks have these things built in. Okay. Fourth one, emojis and symbol meanings. So a lot of the times, if you're having issues with determining a text or a string literal or bringing across a definition, emojis and symbols can be a very handy way to get your point across. Because everyone understands emojis, right? Well, no. So I'm going to give you a few emojis, and I want you to guess what these emojis mean. And then I'm not talking about the meaning you use them for, because those are the regular ones. That's what speaking English does to you. I want you to guess what this means in a different culture. In English, this is great. This is thumbs up. Well, if my mother sends me this, I'm in trouble. But normally this means, hey, good job. What does this mean in other cultures? What could this mean in other cultures? In Iraq, for example, this means something more close to up yours, pal. This is not a good thing. And when Americans entered Iraq, they were greeted by Iraqis with a thumbs up, and they assumed they were very, very welcome. And for some Iraqis that was the case, but for some of them, they used it very knowingly to insult them without getting in trouble, of course. When I told this in Antwerp, an engineer came up to me, he worked at Facebook, and he told me that when they released the like button in Turkey, they had serious issues with the response, because in Turkey, this used to mean the same thing as well. So that changed, of course, after Facebook kept using the like button and the younger generation adopted it. So now you can use a thumbs up in Turkey. Definitions can change over time. But this caused serious trouble for them. We're going to try a few more. What does this mean? Let's start with Italian. What does this mean in Italy? Yeah, it's effectively everything. Yeah, you can have a whole conversation with just this. But it normally means something like, what do you want? What do you want? It's an insulting way of talking in a normal conversation. But you can use this for a whole different range of purposes as well. What does this mean in Iraq, again? There's a lot of examples in Iraq because things went really bad when Americans entered and they didn't care about traditions. So they have good examples. What does this mean there?
Please.
Sorry?
Please.
Please. It's slow down. And in combination with that, what does this mean? Let's start with English. What does this mean? Stop. Easy, everyone understands that, right? In Iraq, this means for Americans this means stop. In Iraq, this means the exact opposite. So this actually caused a few casualties in Iraq, because American soldiers would tell Iraqis to stop at checkpoints, which they understood as, come in, come in. So they kept driving and kept driving, kept driving, and they were clearly welcome to do so, and some people died there. This had serious consequences. Well, later they researched this situation, and now we're not really clear if they actually used this sign or used this sign, which a regular American wouldn't understand either. This is a military symbol. This is not something you expect a civilian to understand. So we're not really sure if this is what they used. This is what they say they used. But whether they actually did, we don't know. But we do know that there was mass confusion over the definition and that actually had serious consequences. We have a few more. This one, more fun. We're done with the sad emojis. What does this mean? What does it mean for you? Clapping, yeah. Americans have a different definition for clapping, and the Chinese understand it that way. This is how Chinese people understand this emoji. And another one in Chinese, this one, what does it mean for us? What does it mean to you? I've heard different definitions from Western people. What does it mean? Innocent, that's what it means to me as well, yeah. I sometimes hear elderly say that they don't understand why. They don't see innocent here, they simply see an angel. Well, the Chinese see an angel as well, but with a different connotation. This is not something you send to your parents if you've done something wrong. You don't do that. So no, you can't use emojis and symbols to get around translating things properly. That's not going to work for you. Last one. This one is maybe not even a cultural thing. I think this is more a generational emoji. So, to who? To whom? To who? Whom? Who? Who sees this as a positive emoji? Most of you. Who see this as a negative emoji? Yeah, a few ones as well. Me too. This is not a good thing. I don't really like this sign. Now my colleagues know. That's one way to tell them. No, this is distrusting for the younger generation. This is simply not grinning enough. So even within one culture, an emoji or a symbol can have a different meaning. So these are almost never reliable ways to communicate. They simply don't have a fixed definition. And even if they do, people don't care. People are not going to look up what this emoji is supposed to mean. It means slightly grinning face, I think. That's the official definition. And even that doesn't mean anything. Why are you slightly grinning? No one knows. Fifth one. A different word order. This is one that people who speak multiple languages do intuitively. They realize this. But people who speak one language sometimes don't realize that this is the case. Not all languages use the same word order. Well, actually, no languages use the same word order. So, if I were to welcome you to NDC London, I could translate this way. I have a translation string here, welcome to. I have my dynamic string that might be different depending on where I'm giving this talk. And I'm very excited, so I'm having this sign here. And this would work in Spanish as well. I would just add a symbol here as well, and we're all done. Exclamation mark, voila. But this doesn't work in Hindi, for example, because the same string in Hindi looks like this. So my word order completely shifted here. There's no way, like literally no way, to translate the correct, the previous statement to Hindi, given the way of translating I just shown you. Yet, this is how I see most of the translations being done. Over 50% of the times, this is how dynamic strings are injected in real-world applications or websites. And it makes sense, because this is a logical way to do it. This feels very natural. But there is a better way. And the better way is to allow variables in your translation string, so you can use the whole string as one. So in PHP, you could use this, for example, but some frameworks like to have literal variable names in there and replace them later. That works as well. Or you've built a custom thing. I don't really care, actually. Anyways, this allows a translator to move the place of this variable. They can now put it to the front. They can do all kinds of things with it. So this works because the translator can now do this. Easy enough. However, there is an important thing you need to realize if you're using the technique I've just shown you, and that is that you can also have multiple variables in a text. And now we're in trouble, because I'm assuming the first variable to be something and the second variable to be something. But in Hindi, I would move this maybe there and then this, and we would get a very weird sentence. So how do we solve this? Yes, use the named variables I just told you about. That's the easiest solution. So if you use this structure in PHP, you do it like this. If you use a different framework, use actual variable names that you replace later on. Okay, I've got another question to you. Oh, by the way, before I do that, first, a nice trick regarding this. If you do this, if you use named variables, you can allow the translator to do something else. And that is reusing variables, which sometimes is very handy. So that's a cool feature of using named variables. You can actually allow translators to be more creative with how to use them. Because translation is not just about literally translating words. That's not what, I hope that point's coming across now. The definition can change as well. So sometimes you simply need different ways of saying something. Okay, I want to go back all the way to, I think this is 2006. I was year high. And there was a bug in WordPress, one of the first real bugs that was published, because they had just started translating WordPress to a different language. So it used to be in English CMS, and it was translated to a different language for the first time. Anyone knows which language that was? What was the first language that the English CMS WordPress was translated to? Guess? Mandarin? No, that would make sense, but no. but you're close. It's Japanese. Japanese, the first language that it was translated to. And there was a string literal that looked something like this. And this made the entire CMS crash. Because what happened? You tell me, what happened here? Yes. There is a percentage sign in here, which indicates that we're going to work with a variable here. So if you're using this, be aware that you'll need to escape your variable signs, your percentage signs. It's actually a very important one. Next one. Context. Translation context is super important to a translator. So in a lot of situations, you see that a developer has worked on an application, they eventually have a translation file with all string literals that they use, and they send that over to a translator. And hey, good luck, enjoy. And that makes sense, but you're missing context if you're working that way. So a lot of professional translation systems have ways to add context to a translation string. So instead of just giving someone a string, you also tell them how it's used, or there's a screenshot in there of the interface or whatsoever. So if we're looking at this string, for example, do you want to go to the shop? How can this possibly go wrong? Why is this not enough? There's a good chance that a translator will send this back. Why? Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, shop is ambiguous. This can be mechanic or garage in American, for example. Yes, definitely. There's more.
Some languages won't have a specific translation for where to go.
Yeah, that's also one. Yeah. How are you going to get there? There could be different verbs depending on the travel method. Yes, definitely. That's the one that I was actually referring to. And I wasn't even referring to the masculine or feminine one. I was talking about the informal and formal one. So in English, there's just you for both elderly and seniors and juniors and interns. And everyone gets you. But that's a very unique thing. Most languages don't do that. So all the examples you just mentioned, the fact that shop can have multiple definitions, the fact that the verb go is not always one verb in a language, the fact that masculine and feminine have different forms, all of these I hadn't considered yet when I wrote this down. So great examples. There are so many things about a sentence that matter. So another one that someone told me after I showed this for the first time is that that word can change as well depending on the location where you're going. So in this sentence, we're all right because we know that it's going to be a shop. That's part of the string literal. But if you were using a dynamic value, it could be that this word masculine, so to needs to be masculine, and if the shop's feminine, you need to use a feminine word there, for example, or plural, singular. Or there are so many things that can go wrong when translating this. So in this instance, I was talking about the difference between this sentence and this sentence. So for the people who don't speak French, the difference is in the beginning here. So this is an informal form, and this is a formal form. And people will take offense if you use the wrong form. Or, well, especially if you don't use this form. And if I mean offense, then you haven't really met the French yet. This is a thing. This is a reason for people not to use your application, because there's not enough respect towards your end user. This matters. And yes, all of the other examples you just mentioned matter. And this is a whole sentence. There's a lot to be deducted here. But most string literals aren't just sentences, they are simply words. That's how we use most string literals. We have a word in a button somewhere, in a menu somewhere, we have a title of a product or whatsoever. These are very short, simple words. For example, disabled. What does disabled mean? This is an example my colleague sent me yesterday. He came across this in an application where this had actually gone wrong. So what can disabled mean? Not able, yes, so impaired, which still is ambiguous. Yes, it can be something like handicapped, or it can be something like deactivated. So in this case, the disabled word was meant to use deactivated. So an account was disabled. However, in the interface, it was showing that the user was handicapped. Because that is how a Dutch translator interpreted the word disabled when he went translating this. He saw disabled and he translated it to the Dutch version of handicapped, and the end user got a notification that, well, a colleague was handicapped. This happens. We've got a few more, and we're going very quickly through the time, so we might have some time afterwards for examples and discussions. The next one is about different word lengths. Words have different lengths in different languages. You've just seen that. We've had a sentence, we've translated it to French, it has a different length. This makes sense, yet designers still do this. This is a mobile menu, looks good. I don't know why, but people keep doing this. And this is a good menu. I like this in English, but not in Portuguese. Because this is the same menu in Portuguese. And this happens a lot in localized versions of websites. We see this all the time. And sometimes it's buttons that don't display the text entirely. Sometimes it's the fact that suddenly I can use horizontal scrolling on a website. You know how annoying that is? Trying to scroll and I'm going the wrong way. Thank you so much. Those kind of things happen a lot. So you could, as a designer, say, oh, well, just do this. Just make it wider. You'll be fine. And let's hope that it doesn't need wrapping. That's a way. You could say, well, I agree, this is a very long word, and it can get very long. It means log out. Let's just use a symbol for this, because symbols never go wrong. You could do that. You could try that. Sure, go ahead. And word lengths can differ quite a lot, but people don't realize how much they can differ. So in these languages that use the Latin alphabet, they are somewhat similar. I mean, the Portuguese example is annoying, but it's okay. But what if the end user uses a very different alphabet altogether? What if your user uses Chinese, for example? Chinese is super dense. It's not comparable to Latin at all. So what you see in apps that are originally Chinese is that they look very weird to us. That's at least how I experience apps like AliExpress or Temu or those kind of apps. They look weird. And that's not necessarily because they have a different view on design there. I mean, they do. But they're targeting Western people with AliExpress. One of the issues is the fact that they design in Chinese. And that doesn't work if you're going to insert translations in a different alphabet, because they are sometimes hundreds of % wider. So this is not a good way to design interfaces. So one of the ways to counter this, if you're talking about mobile menus, is to simply use way more space. Don't use those simple buttons. Just take the whole screen and allow wrapping if necessary and go all the way. Be aware that this is something that's happening to your application, and try duplicating or tripling the number of text in a button and see what happens, because that is going to happen eventually in a language. So one of the languages that has a very long words is German. Yeah, I see some people nodding, yeah. If you know some German words, it's probably those kind of words, or it's ways to insult someone. I'm Dutch, so my way of doing that is simply speaking louder, and then people perceive it as German. If you're talking about word lengths, it can be interface related, but it can also be about other things. So what about SEO text, for example? So I'm writing a text for a website, and I'm writing a meta description. A meta description has a maximum length of 160 characters. That's not entirely true, but if I Google meta description maximum length, I get a page from Google itself who tells me 160 characters, everything after that's cut off. Okay, great. I write a text. I'm describing my talk, and I end up at 159 characters. Look at me, I'm maximizing the space Google has given me. Great. I sent this off to a German translator. Please don't count it. This is less than this. I can't rewrite this text every time I go to a different conference or meetup. I sent this over to a German translator, and they gave me this. This doesn't fit anymore. So either I allow the translator, well, it's both things. So one is, I accept that the translator might have to change the meaning of what I'm trying to make come across. Sometimes that's necessary because it simply doesn't fit or it doesn't work in a culture or whatsoever. The other thing is, stop trying to maximize your value and then expecting someone to do the same thing in a different language. That's not always possible. That's different word lengths. Then this one, sorting differences. So we have an alphabet, and in English that alphabet's particularly easy. It's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to C, and then that's it. But that's not the case for all languages. So even though we all use the Latin alphabet, we still have some letters that we add. So the Swedish, for example, or the German have these kind of special characters, and then I've let out things like the ringel S, the weird double S's. Those things I've let out for now. But my point is, they are at a certain place in the alphabet. The Germans expect that E to be after the A, which makes sense for them. That's how they use that alphabet, right? But what about other languages that have the same alphabet? They can be in a different order. So if I go to Swedish, they also have these weird characters. They also talk funny. But if you look at the alphabet, it looks like this. They put all the special characters at the end of the alphabet, which has serious consequences. Because if you're going to be looking through a list, you're going to find something like this in German. So I'm looking for a person named Mailer. Mailer must be somewhere on this list. He's around the A. Great, there he is. A Swedish person looking for Mailer will do an entirely different thing. They will assume that Mailer is at the bottom here. So they scroll all the way to the bottom, can't find him. He's not in there. That's how they work with the name list. So this is their alphabet. See, Mailer is way more down here. So if you're serving people the same list, they're going to look in different places for the same thing. So you need to localize sorting as well. And that's a very difficult one, because your language supports this, probably. So PHP again has a collator with a sort function. You tell it in which language you need your collator to be. That's local specific, so German can still be German in Germany or German in another country. It sorts, and voila, I get my sorted list. Easy enough. But there's still a different issue with this, and that is that sorting is not always based on the first letter. Because if we're back to this example, we have a list of names. Imagine we have first and last names in here. Some countries, some languages, would expect you to sort them based on their last name. Some of them expect you to sort on the first name. And some languages have something between a first and last name. That can be a second name, but it can also be some sort of prefix to the last name. How do you handle that? That's different per language as well. So sorting is a very difficult one. There is a very easy way to still be able to, or still let users find what they're looking for in a list. What's that way? How do you allow your users to find what they're looking for in such a list? Give them a search box. I don't know why these kind of lists exist without search box, but they do. Give them a search box. And do this in the front end if you must. I don't care. Give them a better way of searching, because going through a list is never a good option. But if you do, be aware, you can make this local specific very easily. There's no way to do this wrong as well. Next one, names. Well, we've talked about the fact that there can be something between the first name and the last name, and it can matter for things like sorting, how these are used. But names are way more difficult than people realize, way more difficult. So let's look at a few assumptions. Newsflash, they're all wrong. Firstly, people have exactly one canonical full name. This is not true. In India, for example, people have, or in some regions of India, I must say, people have different names, period. So there can be a different given name than a name that's used for religious purposes, for example. That's a normal thing in a lot of cultures. They do that in Nigeria as well. There's an ethnic name and there's a Christian name in some regions. That's a normal thing. A lot of regions in the world do that. Chinese people a lot of times have an English name as well, which isn't a form of their Chinese name. It's simply a second name that they use in different contexts. And the other way as well. If you would go to China and you were going to live there, you would adopt a Chinese name. That's a normal thing to do. So you would have different names. Okay, well, you might say, fine, just make people pick one. They at least have one name that they go by, right? No. Let's look at the Finnish again. Finnish people also have different names, and the name that they use depends on who they are talking to. So they will use a different name to their friends than they would use to their family, for example. Those are different names depending on the context. So if you were to create a social media network, you can't just let people insert one name and think that's all. I mean, that's what we do, of course, and people oblige. But that's not how that works. People have different names, and it would be respectful if you support that, or at least let them know why you don't. Okay, well, another assumption, one that I've never understood, but sometimes you're not able to change your name in systems. And I understand that that's not always easy for government systems, for example. There are processes for that. I get that. But this also happens in other systems as well. So, I'm still on this slide. So let's look at a few examples of people who did change their name. Firstly, I want to tell you why people change their names. Well, you tell me, why do people change their names? A few reasons. Getting married, yeah. Divorced, yeah. That's two, very good. More reasons. There are way more reasons. Witness protection can be a good reason, yes, definitely. Religious reasons, yes. Yes. Muhammad Ali changed his name for a religious reason, yes.
Education, I guess.
Sorry?
Like, did you get that degree or master or doctorate?
Yes. I don't know examples of people who change their actual name, but there's a title that changes and that has effect on how your name's used. Definitely, yes. There's more reasons. People also change their name after abuse, for example. So if you're abused by a family member, there's a good reason not to want to use that last name anymore. People change their names. That's normal. People also change their names if they have gender affirmative care, for example. So they switch genders. That's a normal reason to want to use a different name than you used before. There is also people who change their names for political reasons. And who's American? No one? Okay. In America, this is fairly easy, because in America you can do everything with your name. So let's look at a few examples of people who did change their name and what they changed it to give you an idea how far that can go. So the first person we are looking at is Christopher Garnett. Christopher Garnett is an American activist, and Christopher Garnett changed his name to KentuckyFriedCruelty.com. He also owns the website, I assume. There are more people who have done this for political reasons. We also have Brandy Fellow. Oh, you would expect me to know this after all this time. Brandy Fella Dolit. Doesn't really matter how you pronounce it, because he changed his name to ringlingbeatsanimals.com. You can do that. There's Marvin Richardson, who is now famously named pro-life. Those things happen. Another assumption. People's names are case sensitive. That's not true. That's not true. You see this when you get a bank statement. There's a good chance that your name's written in capital letters. It's still your name, isn't it? Yet, people's names are also not case insensitive. There's a correct way of spelling your name. And people who have a name that consists of two names as a first name, notice they have a capital letter in the middle of their name. That's a normal thing for some people. So names are also case sensitive and case insensitive, depending on the context. Another one. People's names do not contain numbers. That's not true. True. Some countries do not allow numbers. That's a fact. But a lot of countries do. And I'm not talking about Einstein, which I personally found very funny. For the people who don't speak German, Einstein means one stone. Do we know an example of someone who has a number in their name, like officially?
Elon Musk's child.
Definitely. Yeah. And he has a lot of things in his name that I wouldn't expect in a name. Why is there a dash in the middle of his first name? Why is there a sign that my computer doesn't support? This can happen. Sure, this is a legal name. People have different first and last names. Recently, someone was complaining on Twitter, they have the same first and last name, and an interface was rejecting their name because first and last names need to be different. That's an error message that some developers actually create. I don't know why, but they do it. That's a thing. And having the same first and last name is so common that there are whole Wikipedia pages to help you search the right Thomas. Because Thomas is a very normal name. There are a lot of famous, these are only the famous people, there are a lot of famous people with Thomas as first and Thomas as a last name. Yet, a lot of developers let you pick. Somehow you need to choose which one's going to be your first name, which one's going to be your last name. My last name is a first name in the Netherlands as well. So I have had that I give my name to a hotel or to an airline, and they send me a notification, hey, we see that you've made a mistake with your name, we've changed it for you. What the hell? That's my name. That happens. And the assumption that people have last names. That's not true at all. I mean, in most regions where the internet is an important part of what they do, they use last names because the internet forces them to. But this is not something that all cultures and all regions do, using a last name. So, can we name a few examples of regions where not having a last name is a normal thing? There's a lot of correct answers here. No? There's regions in, I've got my notes there because I don't remember them. There's regions in Indonesia, there's regions in Afghanistan, there's regions in Bhutan, there's regions in Myanmar, there's regions in Mongolia. Can I scroll? There's regions in Tibet, there's regions in South India, and there's a whole lot of other regions where it's normal not to have a last name. So think about it, if you're trying to reach any of those regions, are you going to force people to have a last name? You're going to miss out. And lastly, and I admit this is a difficult one, the assumption that the assumption that people's names are assigned at birth. So if you're building an application to, I don't know, track the development of your child. You just had a newborn, so you sign up to ijusthadaNewborn.com and you make a profile of your child, and you can log when your child, what do children do when they are born? Walk, talk, lose their first tooth. I don't know what children do. Then it makes sense that the first thing you're going to ask a parent is to tell us the name of that child. Because you're going to create a profile around the child, right? But there are a lot of regions where it's normal not to name your child immediately. So I won't ask you to name them again. But in Iceland, you even have to wait by law before naming your child. a minimum of a few weeks and a maximum of 6 months. So it could very well be that a child is 4 months old and still doesn't have a name. That's perfectly legal in Iceland. In India, there are a lot of cultures where you wait because child mortality rates are relatively high, so they think it brings bad luck to name a child too early. This also happens in regions in Mexico, for example. Jewish people, a lot of them wait 8 days, exactly 8 days, that's a normal thing. I've got time for this. Orthodox Greek people wait until the child is baptized before they pick a name. Oh, it wasn't Mexico, it's northern Brazil. Anyway, so that brings us to the last assumption. People have names. That's by definition not true. There are people without names, especially children. That's all I've got for you. There's an article, Falsehoods Programmers Believe About Names. There's way more examples of things that developers and programmers believe that are not true. It's written by Patrick McKenzie, who has multiple names. It's a great article. And that will be all. Thank you very much. If you, yeah, my bad. If you want to know more, the QR code goes to my LinkedIn. And there are a few more articles that I would recommend. Well, Falsehoods Programmers Believe About Names is one of them. There's What Does a Thumbs Up Mean in Iraq? That tells a bit about the cultural context. And there is Why Developers Should Stop Using ISO 86108 for Daytime. By Robin Pokorny, who I don't agree with, but still is a great article about this topic. Thank you. We do have 3.5 minutes, so if there are any questions, don't hesitate. And otherwise, thank you for coming on the early morning.